And here at Dworshak Dam, built in 1966 as part of the 1962 Flood Control Act. Power came online in 1973 and it's been in operation ever since. It has a structural height of about 717 feet, which makes it one of the tallest straight gravity dams in the Western Hemisphere. It has a structural width at the crest of about 3,282 feet and a reservoir gross capacity of about 3,486,000 acre feet, 2 million of which is used for regional flood control. It saves the Clearwater and Columbia River systems millions of damages every year, and it is essentially a local staple now because it protects the better part of the Clearwater River system from flooding. Now, what does this dam have to do with the readings we've been going over throughout the semester? Well, I'm here to tell you. So, one of the first and one of the last readings we had in this course, the Richardson-Gill article about maps, knowledge, and power, and Orientalism by Edward Said, I feel deserve their own segment to a certain degree because I feel like they cover a lot of the same ground in different ways. The Richardson-Gill article essentially talks about how we use maps, cartography especially, throughout history to define what and where things are. He essentially perceives maps as a sort of language of their own. They have their own etymology, different symbols, different abstractions of where our stuff is and where everyone else's stuff is. And I feel like that has a lot of crossover with Edward Said's Orientalism because it is in essence a work of imaginative geography, which is something he discusses in chapter 1. In essence, he believes that Orientalism is a means of imagining the world outside of what is known. The exotic, the foreign, the not us. The distinguishing between what is our land and what is the land of the barbarians. And I feel like as it relates to projects like Dworshak Dam, in essence, it's because this project, as a construction of the federal government, is essentially a means of extending, albeit benevolently to a certain degree, the reach of the federal government into tribal and state regions. Because in essence, this is all still Nez Perce property, but it's also property of the state of Idaho. But the dam itself is property of the federal government. And it's examples like this of shared space in this region, especially regarding the two hatcheries down the way, one of which is federal, one of which is state. The federal one is eventually going to be handed over to the Nez Perce. So it's these concepts of mixed space, mixed geography, socially, economically, that essentially creates the sort of scenarios being analyzed by Richardson-Gill and Edward Said in their respective works. Gill talks more of the cartographic discourse, how having the ability to make maps and explore and therefore make even more detailed maps is an extension of imperial power, and Orientalism is the ideological, intellectual side of the same coin, in the sense that he describes the British having the ability to analyze the Egyptians on a historical level, gives them the history, the feel for their geography and the place of history and time. Where does Egypt stand in relation to Britain? Obviously, the British are going to use that knowledge to surmise that, of course, the Egyptians are inferior and therefore need to be ruled. Whereas in cases like this, it's more of providing a federal solution to what could have otherwise been a public problem. As in other areas of the Columbia Dam system, obviously the state, federal, and local governments stepped in where otherwise public property could have held in. And that's where I'm going to discuss the issues of Richard White's The Organic Machine. So, Richard White's The Organic Machine is, at its core, a book about energy. Energy especially stored in river systems like the Clearwater and stored behind this dam. He talks at great length about the energy stored in river systems like this, but the book, of course, centers mainly around the Columbia during the pre-contact, early contact, and early modern settings. So it's a book about essentially how we tamed river systems like this and shackled them to giant machines like this for the purpose of extracting energy in a different form. Instead of using the river's more natural flow for stuff like transportation, we invented, nice roads, cars, trains, steamboats, other means of getting around, at which point we didn't necessarily need the natural energy of the river so much as we needed the electrical energy of the river, the potential energy stored in the weight that is contained behind this dam. Now the interesting thing is this dam is leaking. It's not very visible, but right up there is a tiny little leak that is structurally necessary for keeping this dam from falling apart. The Corps of Engineers has tried several times to patch it up. Of course, it leaks again, and they don't want to patch it up again for fear of having the entire thing fall apart. There goes Lewiston and Clarkston, right? So another thing talked about by White in The Organic Machine is how powerful these systems are. We're just standing at the North Fork of the Clearwater, and even this dam, which is relatively new, relatively well built, is slowly being taken apart just by the weight of the water behind it. And he talks about how, long after we're gone, these rivers are just gonna plow through whatever structures we built because it's a system of efficiency. And we build structures like this to kind of decrease that natural efficiency repurpose that natural efficiency towards our own purposes, while also obtaining a certain level of certainty out of the environment in the form of flood control, irrigation, and power supply. Now, the other thing, of course, is what negative consequences come out of controlling that natural environment, and what can we do to mitigate that or abstain from doing that harm in the future. And that is something that's talked about by Jared Diamond in Collapse and J.R. McNeill in Something New Under the Sun. The reason we're here at Dworshak National Fish Hatchery and Clearwater State Fish Hatchery is that the central themes of both McNeill's Something New Under the Sun and Diamond's Collapse have to do with the damage we cause the environment and our responses to it and how sufficient they've been. So these fish hatcheries help mitigate the damage caused by the construction of Dworshak Dam to the natural salmon and trout runs. They produce steelhead and trout for the reservoir and the river system, the wider river system. And it's structures like this that we build to help mitigate the damage caused by other structures we've built that is kind of the focus of Something New Under the Sun, especially in chapters 5 and 6, where he discusses at length our usage of riverine and oceanic systems over time, and how there is so little fresh water on the planet to begin with, and what little we use, we don't exactly use to the utmost efficiency or keep very clean. There is about a quarter of a percent of all the water on the planet that's even accessible or fresh. And the rest of that's salt water, or it's buried in aquifers that we can't get to. Now, collapse is more about what happens if you don't mitigate the damage, or you don't mitigate it well enough. And that creates situations like at Easter Island, where they essentially deforested their own island, and over time it ended up leading to their ultimate decline in social complexity, the breakdown of social order, and situations. The collapse is basically about situations like that throughout the planet. Now, I'm not saying that the fish hatcheries are the only thing between us and society at large collapsing, but it is systems like this that prevent society from collapsing. It prevents the damage from getting so bad that society has to step up and be like, hey, what the hell's going on? We need a radical change to the social order, and stuff like that. So it's systems like this, national, state, tribal mitigation of environmental damage, that essentially prevents us from teetering over the edge. And that is a key component of why these sorts of lessons coming out of these books matter, and why geography at large is important, which is what I'm going to talk about with Harm to Blij, Why Geography Matters. So, Harm to Blij, Why Geography Matters is essentially about how geography provides context for our own existence and for anyone else's. Much in the same way that Edward Said's interpretation of Orientalism is providing the them to us. Why Geography Matters is about providing the where are we and where is everything else in history. He's talking about geography and its understanding at the public level being important to global affairs. He discusses quite lengthily about how the Iraq War and stuff like that were impacted by public perceptions of geography, and I'm sure even Edward Said would agree, probably some public conceptions related to Orientalism. So there's a lot of interesting crossover even between the readings themselves that lend a certain perspective to especially recent history, and it's understanding that even public perceptions of geography can influence major decisions in history, and it's how we choose to order ourselves in the world, in the reality we construct for ourselves, and how we live our lives in this constructed reality that in turn affects how we act in the world. It's essentially the idea that, America conceptualizes itself in a certain way on the world stage, and it's going to act in that manner, in the way it conceptualizes itself in the world around it. And hopefully, with that knowledge in mind, we can act a little smarter and take a little bit better care of the environment, knowing the impact we have on the world around us.